Hello, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. We're really excited to chat with you guys a little bit about how to maximize and optimize your off-premise business. Got some great folks to join the conversation today. You all are muted, except for the three of us who are going to be having the conversation, but we're going to give everybody a couple more minutes for some of the stragglers who are still kind of hopping on the call here. So if you're sitting alone, enjoy the silence. If you're sitting with others, talk amongst yourselves. Anyone who's joined in the last minute or so, we're just giving folks a couple more minutes to sign on. So sit tight, we'll get started in a few minutes. Give it about one more minute, mostly because I feel so uncomfortable with the silence. Oh man, got some encouragement to get started. All right. I promise I will start at 11:04 for those of you who are eager to get going. I've got some comments here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Want to be sensitive to everyone's time. Just for everybody's awareness, we plan on having a conversation for about 30 minutes or so, and then I'm certainly opening it up to some of the questions at the end. So first of all, I'd just like to sort of say welcome and thank you all so much for joining today. You know, obviously these are really unique and challenging times kind of for everybody, but in particular for those of us in the restaurant industry. And really now is a time more than ever, I think, for us to kind of put our heads together to collaborate, because there really is no shortage of challenges right now. But I also think that there are some really compelling opportunities that we can all be considering together. So by way of an introduction, my name's Tommy Gordon. I'm the Director of Partnerships for Relish Works, which is the innovation hub for Gordon Food Service. As I mentioned, I'm here to kind of facilitate what we hope is the first of many conversations about the ways that restaurants can really kind of think about extending both their brand and their offering beyond the four walls that you operate in today, and really do so through the context of how can you elevate your customer experience, regardless of where they're sitting when they consume their meal, and ultimately to really maximize your revenue potential. Obviously, off-premise was a significantly growing trend prior to COVID-19. And I think that more and more consumers have become comfortable with the way of the world now, and are seeing that there are some real benefits to being able to consume a restaurant quality meal from home. And so we really only anticipate this trend accelerating on the other side of this. Before we dive in, just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. First, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box where we invite you to ask any questions that you have about this topic. And I'll try to reserve some time, as I mentioned at the end. We probably won't be able to get to all of those questions. So if we don't touch on your question, we'll do our best to follow up with each of you individually through email at the end. Or I'm sorry, following today's discussion. Secondarily, we created a kind of how-to guide for optimizing your off-premise business. And you can actually find that, as well as some other COVID-19 resources, which also will include a recording of this webinar at our website that we built in partnership, obviously, with Gordon Food Service, called EAT.NEWS. And you can also access EAT.NEWS as well as other additional resources at gfs.com. So finally, I would just like to say, if you'd like to dialogue further about how to implement any of these sort of tactics or thoughts into your business, we really encourage you to reach out to your customer development specialist or your business solutions team. And they, I know, would be very eager and excited to sort of help you implement any of the things that we're talking about today. Otherwise, we included an email here that you can reach out to us, and we can kind of help connect you with the appropriate people. So just email us at info@eat.news, and we'll get you connected. So great. Now that the boring stuff is checked off, I'd like to introduce you to our two friends and colleagues of ours, both of whom have deep expertise and experience around this topic, as well as sort of the restaurant industry more generally. So Geoff Bonham and Abhinav Kapur. I'm going to let you guys do a quick intro of yourselves, and I'll start with you, Abhinav.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of Bikky. Bikky is a data and marketing platform for restaurants. We basically aggregate customer data across third-party and first-party channels to help you see the entire guest footprint. Pre-COVID, I used to say data was a way to help make customers more profitable. Post-COVID, given the accelerated shift to off-premise, and even I think some of the ways in which COVID is going to change in-house casual dining, data is really, we see it as the lifeblood of the business going forward. So we built kind of automated ways for restaurants to just understand and better engage their guests using the systems and data that they already have. And again, pleased to be here. Great.
Thanks, Abhinav. Geoff, you're up.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. My name is Geoff Bonham. I work as what we call Business Solutions Manager for Gordon Food Service, where my team and I basically offer restaurant consultation and support. I'm based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I've been at GFS for close to 22 years now, with a number of years in restaurant operations before that. So, again, excited to help anyone that's on the call today, and just looking forward to helping all of us through this time. So again, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again. I guess we'll just kind of dive right into the topic of conversation today. So I actually kind of like to start with a question to you, Abhinav. It seems like there are so many options between third-party delivery platforms like Grubhub and Uber Eats, then to delivery management tools like Sociable or Olo, Menusphere, places where, restaurants can really kind of contain sort of the digital experience of their end consumer. And I think it can be challenging to kind of cut through the noise of this sort of variety and sort of rapid acceleration of digital technology tools that can ultimately really help accelerate and sort of optimize our off-premise strategies, but it's really difficult to cut through the noise. So do you think you could kind of give us a sense for the type of solutions that exist today and how, one might think through which option makes the most sense for their business?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it really depends on where you are today. If you are looking to start a delivery business from scratch and you just need to get up and running as fast as possible, then going third party makes sense, right? The pros again of third party delivery. I'm biased. If there are any pros, I will caveat, just given my business. If there are any pros to third party delivery, it's that you can get set up quickly, listed, get consumer eyeballs in a pretty seamless fashion, right? My parents run a restaurant here in New York. They just signed up for Uber Eats. Within a few days, the tablet got sent to them. And when they reopen in a couple of weeks, they're just going to install the tablet and bam, they're an Uber Eats. They're a restaurant on Uber Eats now. The flip side is, Uber Eats takes the onus of marketing to the customer. And with that comes a 20 to 30% fee across all third-party delivery channels. So when you are thinking about getting up and running quickly, that comes obviously at a cost. They charge a fee and they own the data on that customer. And that's not something that can hobble your operations per se. You just have to balance it and either have lower cost menu items that can afford that hit, because it is ongoing regardless of whether it's a new customer or a repeat customer. Or what we've seen other restaurants do is actually mark up the cost of their traditional menu items to essentially pass most of that fee off to the customer. So a study we look at is El Pollo Loco. If you order direct from them, their 2-piece chicken and biscuits meal is $10 on their native platform, which is powered by Olo, one of the companies you mentioned, Tommy. But if you go on Uber Eats, it costs $13. So they're taking the spread, they're taking what Uber Eats charges them and then just reallocating it to the customer. On the flip side, there are a handful of native delivery providers out there like Sociavore, like ChowNow, newer ones that focus more on the guest experience like GoParrot and Lunchbox. And what they enable you to do is actually treat your delivery / off-premise business as an extension of your in-house business. So you have more flexibility on branding, on special menu items, on pricing, as I mentioned. And so I think if you're willing to get up and running quickly, again, third party is not a bad way to go. If you do want to take some more time and if you have time to invest a little bit more capital and resources in owning the customer relationship, then working with a native provider like ChowNow, Olo, Lunchbox, GoParrot, et cetera, is a good place to start. Because again, the focus, I think, coming out of this crisis is going to be on owning the customer relationship. And so the two can work together as well. It just really comes down to what your priorities are and where your delivery business or off-premise business is today.
Yeah, one thing we've heard recently in a conversation with Menusphere is that, DoorDash is sort of, almost bifurcating the different offerings that a third-party delivery service typically offers all in one. And they're saying, well, really, if you want to sort of own the customer experience and own them on your native website, we will just manage the delivery of that
logistics
product.
piece. Yeah,
just if you want to sort of pick and choose which component. Do you anticipate more of these solutions that are today sort of packaged as an all-in-one, kind of creating offerings where they can integrate and sort of pick and choose which components or which features, the operator wants to use?
Yeah, I think the problem is the market was noisy before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just had a call with, the COO of a restaurant group here in New York, and he's like, there's just so many confusing tech pieces of the stack. I don't know where to start. The problem coming out of this is that it's going to still be more confusing because the accelerated shift in customer behavior is just going to warrant more people to enter the market. But to go back to your initial point, from my perspective, that is the dream scenario where you do what Chipotle does, which is, I know it sounds big, but it's Chipotle, but it's actually quite a simple concept, which is you own the guest-facing channel. Right, the customer orders through your website or your app, and then you take somebody like Uber or DoorDash, which really is built good fulfillment and logistics networks, and you just relegate them to that fulfillment and logistics role. Olo has a product out there called Dispatch, where that's exactly what they do. They power your website, and then when the order comes in, they handle all the real-time bidding on the back end to figure out which logistics provider to push the service to. And those logistics providers are Uber Eats, our DoorDash, our Postmates. So I think coming out of this, I think the restaurants themselves will start to think of off-premise business as an extension of their in-house. Traditionally they've been, okay, I'm started on third-party delivery. I want to own the data and the channel. So let me just launch with Chow Now. And really all you see is like for like the same menu items that they have on Grubhub are the same menu items that they put on Chow Now. And that really does not provide the guest any incentive to choose your direct channel over a third-party channel, right? Because the third party has the convenience and has the lock-in. But I think coming out of this, there is actually room for operators to experiment more, to invest in hospitality on the online channel, and still use those third-party fulfillment / logistics pieces to actually get the food to the customer. So the restaurants own the reason for the customer, for the diner to come direct, and then they just lean on the expertise of these tech platforms to actually get it from the store or the ghost kitchen or whatever to the customer's home.
Yeah. This is a question that I'll kind of start with you, Abhinav, and then I'd actually like to hear your perspective on this as well, Geoff. But if I'm a independent restaurant and I don't do any really off-premise business today, what would you recommend is the first step that I could take towards sort of dipping my toe into this space?
So we just signed a customer who they actually have 20% of their business is delivery here in New York, but they are launching a separate virtual brand, virtual kitchen, treating it like a different business, like a different entity. And what they're going to do before they're trying to make the decision right now, which is, are we going to be solely third-party delivery, or are we actually going to invest in this to build the brand ourselves? And so what they're doing, again, for them, it's about time to market, getting data, and understanding how well that concept is going to do. And so they're just starting on third-party delivery. They're just launching on across 3 or 4 separate third-party delivery platforms in a couple weeks, and they're going to let that run for a month because they want to see things like, okay, what are daily sales, right? What are the ratings and reviews like? With the help of something like what we do, is how frequently are customers coming back? So if you're a smaller independent operator, what I would say again is it really comes down to just what are your priorities. Do you just need to spin up an off-premise business as quickly as possible? Then third party is fine for that. Where I think where we are at an advantage today as an operator relative to when the market first started, at least in New York 10 years ago, is the costs getting into it, right? Back then, 10 years ago, Seamless was a 5 or Grubhub was 5 to 10% per order, and now it's 20% per order. So you have you're able to look backwards and say, great, I know what this is going to do to my margins. I know what this is going to do to my P&L. I will adjust my menu or my pricing accordingly to account for the fact that they are charging me this fee. But you're also able to take advantage of just getting up and running very quickly, which might be your priority given where the market is today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Before, Geoff, you answer, I would like to highlight there are some tools, and I know Chowly is one that we're familiar with here in Chicago. Yep. That for operators who are just getting up and running and want to sort of test across the various third-party delivery platforms, but are apprehensive of the operational lift that it can take on their team to have 4 tablets sitting in their back of house. Yeah. There are resources like Chowly that will aggregate and integrate with your point of sale system to create a single dashboard so that you can get up and running fairly quickly. So totally. That is kind of one call out that I want to add to that. Geoff, what do you think in terms of what are some initial steps that customers or operators could take today?
Yeah. Assuming that even when we reopen and restaurants are allowed to let back in some dining rooms, those are probably going to be a compromise scenario, maybe 50% occupancy or 75% occupancy. And I think it's safe to say that you're not going to be able to make that sales revenue dollar that you need without having a pretty strong off-premise program. And so even when we resume normal business, that's going to be a long ways away. And we're going to need those revenue streams of off-premise. So what I would tell anybody right now is, if you were doing takeout prior to all of this, and most operations were, start there and build that curbside process out. That's where I might start. I would also say, if you've not done any of these, I would start with one third-party delivery service and get in, just learn that process, dip a toe in the water. What has happened over the last 5 to 6 weeks with consumers is they have experimented with all kinds of new to them, new technology and new experiences. Many people in the last 5 to 6 weeks have gotten their groceries delivered for the first time through a Shipt or an Instacart. They have signed up with Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, etc., for the first time and placed an order. And I would encourage operators to think the same way. This is the time to set your fears aside and take action and do something that you've not done before, and employ something that you have not done. Because at some point, this is going to be our new reality, and you've got to put a toe in the water somehow. And the sooner you get started, the sooner you drive excellence at that. And so curbside is probably the closest to the experience that they were already delivering within their operation. That's probably something they were already had some experience with. And then just find out what's really what third-party delivery is really about by dipping the toe in the water, getting started with one of them, and then really it's just a matter of learning. And that's the key today is those who take action are going to win over those who do not act and sort of say too much wait and see. Fortune's favoring the bold right now more than ever before. What I would tell anybody is jump in, do it, learn, and continue to just learn every day and sharpen these things and continue to grow out from there.
Yeah, I think, Geoff, that's a great point. I think what we've also been hearing from the operators we speak with as a corollary to that is this event is just a hard reset for everybody in the industry. Every sort of assumption that you have made over the last 30 years about how the business is or should be is kind of up in the air, or at least maybe not up in the air, but this is at least the time for you to reevaluate some of those assumptions. Because no one knows what the future is going to look like, right? Even here in New York, like I'm telling my team that maybe July 1st is when we can be outside again. And, you know, I talk to some operators and they say September. And as scary as that sounds, right, it does give you at least a window to understand that whenever things do come back, exactly what you said, Geoff, it won't be the way it was before. It's going to be kind of a measured step back. And even by that rationale, like some consumer behaviors are just going to be permanently changed. And so it's fortune favors the bold. Exactly as you said it, Geoff. Now's the time where you can experiment and learn about and have some control, frankly. Like you actually have control. Before there were so many forces and you're like a hamster on a wheel running in place, dealing with third-party delivery, catering, in-house customers. And given this kind of reset, you actually can take back some control and almost design the business, especially the off-premise business, in a way where you didn't have that ability before, because it was, I need to get on or I'm missing sales, right? And now everybody's missing sales.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of spin it the other way and try to treat it as a positive.
The other thing I would add to that too, that I think is really interesting is even when we think about getting back to normal, we have some historical evidence from other industries and other retail businesses where we often think about digital and brick and mortar competing with each other, when actually I think that they're quite complementary. So you look at it, you look at a business, for example, like Warby Parker, who when they put in a brick and mortar location into a geography, they actually see their online sales spike. Similarly, when they do a sort of specific kind of intentional digital effort within a specific geography, they actually see their brick and mortar sales go up. And so I actually think of these two things as very complementary and a real opportunity to actually maximize a restaurant's revenue streams. I'd like to kind of do a little bit of a pivot, because one thing that I think is challenging is really trying to figure out what menu offerings to sort of start with when it comes to an off-premise strategy. And so, Geoff, I kind of like to kick that one over to you and just kind of get your thoughts on what are some considerations that operators might think about when getting set up for a successful off-premise program.
Yeah, the first thing that I'm almost invariably sharing with an operator when we sit and talk is to say, first thing we have to let go of is that we're not going to do the menu that we were doing prior to coronavirus. That full menu, chances are, is just not a feasible solution in off-premise. Simply put, it's going to have to be smaller. And so the question then is, how do you trim back while doing the best service for your business and doing best for you? I start with, first, what is core to your brand? What are those items or those sections of your menu that simply speak to the personality of your brand? Simply put, if you didn't offer them, it's just not you. Those things have to be in the mix. I think, secondly, from there, I recommend working on the analytics. If you can take this time to do a formal menu analysis, I strongly recommend it. Know what your plate costs are, know what your sales figures are, pull some of that data from your point of sale. This is the time to let go of those things that just don't drive sales and profits on your menu. I've analyzed more than a few menus in the last 10 plus years, and I can tell you very consistently, it's not an 80-20 rule, but it's about 80% of sales and margins are driven by about 40% of that menu. So understanding that a whole lot of those items are really not what's driving your sales, those things also should be considered as candidates for deletion for your off-premise menu. I think third, I go to execution. What can you turn out of your kitchen with consistency, efficiently? What do you pretty much tell yourself, we're going to do well at this when these things come out pretty much each and every time? I think the last thing to consider is what is this product going to look like when it arrives at its end state? Especially in a world with third-party delivery, it's not just maybe what is this going to look like in 15, 20 minutes, it's what is this going to look like in 40 minutes? I hate to say that, that's the reality. And so all of your items may not meet all 4 of those criteria really, really well, but make sure they're hitting at least 2 or 3 of those and that you're not whiffing with any of those. And so we can go on a whole other trail about what travels well and what's operationally efficient, etc. But making sure that you take your whole menu, pour it through those filters, and I think what comes out at the bottom is probably a menu that looks to be about somewhere between 40 to 60% of your total menu size today. And then I think it just comes down to gathering your staff and saying, how do we be excellent each and every time at this experience?
Yeah. Abhinav, you guys collect, data on a lot of the sort of trends that are happening. So from a data perspective, what kinds of items are you guys seeing operators sell a lot of right now during COVID-19?
Yeah, I want to give one follow-up to an operational piece that Geoff mentioned was, there's a restaurant in Chicago where it's the so-called crispy fry problem, which is the fries get soggy when they get to the end customer. And so like an operational hack that they did was they would just keep the fry cup on the side. And so when the third-party delivery person would come in and like tape it to the kiosk, and so when the third-party delivery person came in to actually pick up the meal, they would hand the fry cup to the operator, and then the operator would fill the fries, and then they'd pack the rest of the meal and go. So it's like even parceling out like efficiency and what travels well. You knew fries were going to get soggy, so you don't put them in the bag until right when it's time for them to actually travel.
Absolutely.
Tommy, circling back to your question, what we've seen is a big shift in favor of family meals. And by that, I mean, most people, if you think about traditional third-party delivery, it is a stack of, at least from the consumer standpoint, it's a stack of menu items. And let's say you got a family of 4, you click one by one through those menu items, and then customize them within the menu, and then you add them to the cart and you go. What we are seeing do well is family bundles, which are already prescribed by the operator. Here is a meal for 2. Here is a meal for 4. Here's a meal for 6. And so from the consumer standpoint, all they need to do is click on one of those bundles, and it's very limited customization. Because if you think, I always like to think of like, what is my day like, right? Like I'm in Queens, New York with my in-laws and my 2 young kids. We're juggling working from home and being a home tutor at the same time. And when it comes time for dinner and you actually want to spend time with everybody and you want to order delivery, you don't want to be taking everybody's preferences and trying to click through or calling them over to order one by one. You just want to select, okay, that's a meal for 6 of us. Okay, is it chicken, beef, pork? done, move on to the next one. So it simplifies the process for the consumer. You're prescribing essentially a range for them to pick from, and it just makes the consumer's life easier. And we've actually seen that do better. Dinner as a whole, right? Lunch is being replaced by dinner as a whole, at least in New York City and Chicago, where we have the most data. But within those two metros, the family meal bundle is actually what's selling the most beyond sort of any just set dinner items.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. Thanks. I kind of want to shift a little bit to some of the operational considerations that restaurants can start implementing for an off-premise business. And again, Geoff, I'll start with you in terms of when you think about just like small hacks that folks can do either back of house or front of house to avoid, like, if they're managing, peak hours for dine-in service and peak hours for off-premise. I just think about some of, you don't want to keep customers waiting in either scenario. You don't want to clog up your host stand. And so what are some, like, if you have a couple kind of tips and tricks or hacks that folks could consider to sort of streamline the operational implications of an off-premise strategy?
Yeah, the first things that I'm thinking about in that regard are first, again, mindset shift. I think historically in restaurants, takeout and what we would have called off-premise back then was typically a secondary concern for nearly everybody in the restaurant. You handed that job to the host or hostess, or you handed it to the bartender. And those were, not for either of them, was that their number one priority. And then the kitchen, that was not necessarily number one priority. I think first things first is to say, again, we talk about those big scale mindset changes is you've got to have the best people in your operation dedicated to this process. That is different from where we've been in the past. You've got to really think about how do we put somebody into this, start building in off-premise into maybe managerial incentives, create new roles in your operation, but really elevate it up and consider it no longer to be sort of that secondary priority, but put it on par with your dine-in experience. First things first. I think after that, another way to just think about this, if you've been in this industry for a while, maybe you've worked in or have a familiarity with a restaurant who had a traditional bar, seated with guests in front of it, but then somewhere else in the operation, there was a service bar. And that service bar was just dedicated to making drinks for the servers. Thinking about that same mindset, but saying your primary kitchen then is still for your classic dining room, but is there a way to carve out some space or rethink your literal space to dedicate it toward doing this? Another hack, so again, use this time to think, we're not just putting Band-Aids on and just thinking, how do we get through this stopgap measure, but what will our kitchen look like once we reopen? How do we shift it up now so that we can practice it and work with it now? So I think you're dedicating space, you're dedicating time in that way. Another thing I've seen is thinking about that expo area. I've seen people get creative and take a smaller metro shelving unit on casters, on wheels, and they put everything they need from a off-premise dining on that. So that has their tape, the markers, the checklist, the boxes, the lids, the bags. They bring that right up to the line, and so they're able to work that dine-in side here, but then they've got that off-premise side right here. So it's outside of that, I think you're going to get into a lot of custom solutions that are just going to be very unique to each single operation. But I think that mindset shift first, use this time now to practice and just assume that you're going to have two separate ideas going on at once. And again, I like that shelving idea. I like the idea of looking around your kitchen and saying, how can we even move some equipment around and change even the line flow itself, radical as that seems, to say, this is our reality now, and we're going to figure this out with a mindset to our earlier conversation about menu size. A lot of these things become possible if we're not beholden to the menu we were doing before, but we're writing a menu that we know we can live with long term. So those are the top things that I'm thinking about right now, Tommy, on that topic.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're I want to start transitioning. We've got a couple questions that have come in, but before I do, I kind of want to give you both a chance to sort of give us a sense of where things might be going. We've been talking about this sort of throughout the conversation, but as I start thinking about future trends and things that we can start preparing for today, I want to give you both a chance to say, like, what do you see us doing in sort of this notion of a digital restaurant or an off-premise strategy or online ordering And what are some things that you think are really going to stick after we sort of come out the other side of this? Abhinav, I'll let you start.
Yeah. I used to think that it's weird that, and maybe this is more indicative of my personality, but I used to think that third-party delivery was just going to own the future of restaurants, and that native delivery, meaning deliveries coming through your own channel, would only ever be 20 to 30% of your delivery business. And now I actually think the opportunity is closer to 50 or 60%. And the reason I say that is because everything operates on a spectrum between efficiency and experience. And if you look at the third-party delivery, even look at Grubhub's national TV ads, it's a guy on a couch waiting for Taco Bell. And like I'm vegetarian. It's the only fast food I can eat, so I love Taco Bell. So I'm not throwing shade at them, but it's maximized to be the fastest route from click to mouth of food. And what we are seeing now are operators starting to dig in and rethink, instead of, like I said before, just let me list everything that's on Grubhub on my ChowNow or my Olo or my Socialboard site. They're actually starting to say, okay, what are my unique advantages as a business? Why do customers come to me in the first place? And let me create a digital hospitality experience. And we are seeing operators do well with that. Like I've seen native delivery for some brands go from 20 to 40% during this time. And it can be something very simple as we are creating a taco lunch to feed frontline workers. So go to our website, order direct, and every meal you order, we'll just deliver it to the closest hospital to us. And I mean, like, of course that is important and critical, but what you're also doing is you're breaking the habit of a consumer just relying solely on convenience and third-party delivery, and you're getting them to visit you as a brand and identify with you as a brand and say yes to you over the internet. And with that, they give you your data. They give you the right to sort of engage them and build a relationship with them. And so that's why I'm actually quite bullish where, operators who are investing today in hospitality online are actually, there's a bigger market out there for them than where I initially thought pre-COVID.
That's great. Geoff, would you add anything?
Yeah, I would say there's something I've been thinking about for some time now, and this was pre-COVID, but here it is. Most of the time, more often than we think, what customers are figuring out first is before they settle on a restaurant, they're figuring out what type of experience do I want to have first. Translated, what that means is I'm driving home from work, I call my wife, we get on the phone. Before we settle on any restaurant, what we're first figuring out is, what do we want to do? Do we want to swing through a drive-through? Do we want to just come home and cook? Do we want to come home, change our clothes, and go back out? But the experience is what we're choosing first. I think those that can clarify what experiences that they excel at and then make that as smooth a process as possible are the ones that win. I've heard experiences over the last 5 to 6 weeks where people said, I tried to order from restaurant X, I called there 3 times, I never got an answer, or I went to their website and it was very clunky. I think the ones that win are the ones that simply provide clarity and confidence. And there's one of the reasons why some of the restaurants that we like to kind of, we say, oh, those aren't very good, but then what's the secret to their success? Sometimes it's just that they are simply easy to do business with. I think that's the other thing. So being easy to do business with and being clear, I think, are going to be paramount. I think the second 2 things long-term to be thinking about is food safety and sanitation. We have to put it out there. If you cannot project confidence by way of your professionalism in that process, but also that you're providing a food safe experience, that's going to be at a premium going forward. Restaurants that can't do that are going to struggle. The last piece is, anytime you see 26 million people go on to unemployment in a 5-week span, you've got to consider that we're going to be in the economic situation that always tends to flow down into dining habit. That's going to be comfort foods, baked goods, processed foods, and high caloric value for the dollar. That is where it's going to be at for the foreseeable future, especially if we don't start to see massive amounts of those people re-employed. And if this starts to drag out, that will be, somebody who lived through 9/11 in this business and 08, that is what tends to drive menus and dining habits through that. So be thinking about those.
That's great. I am going to shift to some of the questions that we've been getting in the Q&A section, but I'd be remiss if I didn't explicitly mention, it's kind of been woven into our conversation, but my own sort of, I know I'm not one of the featured panelists here, but I think that investing in packaging is just important as you think about your carryout business, the implication that that has for how your food travels and the quality of the food when it arrives, as well as from a branding perspective. It's the first thing your customers see of your brand when it enters into their in-home dining room. So I would add that, and I know that particularly, we've got folks at Gordon Food Service who are really well qualified to sort of walk you through that. I will say I know that right now is a challenging time when it comes to sourcing packaging because of the increased demand. But anyway, I wanted to mention that. So I'm going to move to some of the online questions here, and we won't be able to cover all of these. But the first one I think is really actually a really, really good question. And I actually think that at the root of it, it's really around this notion of customer conversion when it comes to who owns the end customer between third-party delivery and the operator. I've actually had conversations with both of you about this, but this person asked, what about working, a first-time offer coupon or repeat for takeaway orders through first or third-party delivery in order to create that loyalty? I think that I'd love to hear if you guys have seen how you've seen that executed successfully, particularly in that conversion from third-party back to really owning that customer as the restaurant. Abhinav, I'll kind of kick that to you first.
Yeah, sure. I think what most consumers don't realize is that ordering direct is actually cheaper than ordering from the restaurant. Ordering direct is cheaper than ordering through third party. Sorry. And by that I mean, I talked a little bit earlier about marking up menu prices on third parties, but the third parties themselves, their business model is designed to it's a three-sided marketplace, and so they need to charge the consumer extra fees to actually make money on the transaction, even though they're collecting 20 to 30%. So, what we've seen is we have work with a Mexican restaurant. They give $10 off the first order of $20 or more, and then free chips on every order. We work with another customer. They give 10% off on every online order, right? And so, like, what I've seen are just built-in incentives to actually get customer mind share and just let them know that ordering direct is not just best for the restaurant, but it's actually best for you as a consumers. Right now we're in that wave. We've seen a lot of criticism of third-party delivery from big chefs like David Chang and Hugh Atchison, and that sentiment only gets us so far. Longer term, you really just need to appeal to the consumer's wallet. And again, and balance that with the experience. And again, some of the ways I've seen first party or restaurants lock in consumer habits on first party is just making it cheaper, right? That's it. Or ordering a discount, or through scarcity, where you're offering certain menu items that are just not available on third party. Like maybe it's your best menu items where you're offering them only on your first party platform and just not on third parties. It's not to say you don't put as much love into the food that goes on third parties, but again, it's on you as an operator to try and create something special, which every restaurant has. They all have something special. It's just bringing that in a digital realm and then letting customers know that whether it's a discount or whether it's scarcity, that the only way to actually get that is by ordering direct.
Great. Geoff, would you add anything that you've seen customers do in terms of converting third-party delivery customers to sort of direct relationships with the operator?
It's the oldest answer in the book, but it's great service, it's great product. That is the best conversion that you can do. I think for those, especially I mentioned earlier, that trial period, the first time somebody does Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever, they come away going, boy, that was slick, and they think highly of Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub. Yeah. Over time, though, when they've experienced that enough times, they realize then they start filtering down what were the restaurants. Then they kind of lose sight of the platform, the portal, etc. And that's where I think restaurants still win. In the end, you can't get around subpar food or subpar service. Now, I'm going to tie it back to a point we were just talking about earlier. I think putting some kind of experience into your off-premise dining is where it's at, being very thoughtful. It comes down to even simple things such as saying, when we send out our nachos, instead of putting that queso right over the top, we're going to put that in a side container, and we're going to explain that to the guest as it goes out. We're going to include reheating instructions. I think adding X points of excellence are the same thing in off-premise in terms of there's no quick, easy way around building a brand. And sure, you could make some offers. I would consider throwing in some of those little extras. I've seen a restaurant in Indianapolis that's doing a bread pudding with every order right now during COVID-19. And that's working. It's relatively cheap and inexpensive. It's a nice little surprise. And as long as everything else is excellent through the order, those are the kinds of people that get those repeat orders. So yes, you can make offers, but ultimately you're going to live and die by that sort of thing. And in the end, there's no getting around, just great quality, great service.
Yeah, and I think like one thing we're seeing actually is we have a customer, a great point on the bread pudding. We have a customer that they send out a free cookie only on third-party delivery orders. They send out a free cookie and they write a Post-it note on it, and they say, and the Post-it note says, next time order direct, it's better for us, or next time order direct. And what they'll do is they'll say, next time order direct and get 10% off, use this code. And it's literally just, it's somebody in the kitchen, you know, when they're packing the order, just taking a Sharpie, taking a Post-it note, slapping it on a cookie, and just writing a handwritten note to the customer. And so it's like, it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. It's little things like that that guests appreciate. And that, again, creates that emotional resonance with your brand and your food that wins them over and gets them to come direct next time as well.
Yeah. We've got time probably for one more of these questions in the Q&A, so I'll just move to the very next one. This person actually brings up an interesting point. I think so much of this conversation is sort of oriented around urban centers, and this operator's in a rural but tourist-based area where they don't actually have third-party delivery services. What would be your recommendations on some good first steps that they could consider in the absence of a third-party delivery?
Tommy, can I take that one first?
Yeah.
Go for it.
What is great about smaller communities is that they tend to be tight-knit intentionally. That's the whole point. That's the upside of a tighter-knit community. I know I can speak to a restaurant in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan who has done so well during this period by being very engaged with their community. Their Facebook page has been wildly active. They take time, I want to say every second or third day, to put a profile of one of their employees onto Facebook to put a personal face and name to say, this is who you're supporting when you come and place a pickup order with us. They're leaning into what they are and who they are. And so they're saying, yeah, we're not so much, they can't even get into the third-party delivery game. They know they're going to live and die on pickup, curbside. So they've said, come and see us. And they've attached those incentives by really getting that emotional piece there, doing little extra things that are based on knowing their regulars, et cetera. So again, I know of another restaurant that's taken to social media over the last 6 weeks. They're highlighting their regular guests on their platform. And so they're calling out, hey, Bob and Tina, can't wait to see you again, and doing it that way. So it's really just shifting how you market, but in the end, they're still just trying to pull people in and get engagement. So it looks different, but you're gonna just have to lean on curbside as being your primary method. And for those, again, it may not be the classic off-premise, but I'd be looking at retail. In some of those communities, they're closer than the nearest grocery store. This is your chance to tap into retail. Look at your local regulations around sales of alcohol, package those things together. It's just about changing your off-premise strategy, but it's certainly, it's just different. It's no less than.
Yeah, I'll give a quick plug before you jump in. Abhinav, we actually created how to convert your restaurant into a corner store guide that lives on EAT.NEWS that I think is a great resource to that point about ways that you can actually think about repurposing your actual physical space during a time when that space might be well utilized for adjacent opportunities. Abhinav.
Yeah, I was going to say, I talked to a friend who lives in rural Louisiana 2 days ago, and he was saying the biggest thing he's saying are, to your point, Geoff, the restaurants partnering with grocery stores, and the restaurants just basically, they make set number of meals, they drive over to the grocery store, they leave them in the grocery store, and then people come to the grocery store and they just pick up the meals. And that way you're not doing individual fulfillment to every single customer or, totally lean in, obviously, to curbside pickup, but if customers are further away from your restaurant than the grocery store, it just saves them the extra kind of miles that they might need to travel. The other thing, and leaning into Geoff's point around community as well, I saw an article recently about a group of restaurants in rural Oregon, and the restaurants themselves have banded together and basically built their own delivery service. So they basically hired a few people from the community with cars, and they said, come between our 5 restaurants and just make the deliveries, right? We'll set it up through text message, we'll set it up through Facebook Messenger, we'll set it up through just phone calls, but we'll tell you basically how many meals we have at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. That need to go out and where they need to go. And the drivers like it because they're making extra tips as well, right? Normally, if they're inside by themselves, it gives them a chance to get out there and make a little extra money while also enabling your restaurant to just go beyond your 4 walls. So.
That's great. This has been a really great conversation, and I feel like there's still so many things that we could probably dig into here. So for those of you whose questions weren't answered, we will reach out to each of you individually. Again, I encourage everybody to reach out to their Gordon Food Service sales rep if they need help sort of further dialoguing about any of these things. So yeah, I just want to really thank everybody for joining the conversation today. Geoff, Abhinav, thank you both specifically for your perspective, your insight. It was highly valuable. Finally, if you'd like to participate in more of these types of webinars, we're going to be doing this a little bit more regularly, particularly during the current crisis. And so consider joining our newsletter to find out about some more of those topics that'll be coming up. It includes things like, what does a COVID cleaning guide look like? What are digital restaurant marketing tactics that you can take advantage of during this time? Or how might you consider things now in order to reopen your restaurant effectively on the other side of this? So yeah, again, sign up on EAT.NEWS and feel free to reach out to us at info@EAT.NEWS if you have any specific questions. Thank you all so much again, and look forward to having more conversations like this in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tommy.